Greetings from Adam's Corner. It's May 25th, 2024 as I record this. 47 years ago today, Star Wars was released. It was a big deal to a lot of us, myself included. I was 6 the day that it was released. And I get a bug up my shirt, as it were, every year when the May the 4th thing comes down the pike and everybody's posting about May the 4th be with you. Well, those of us who are serious Star Wars fans and want to be accurate about these sorts of things, we know that May the 25th was the actual day that Star Wars was released. Now, I've mentioned in previous videos that I grew up in a small town about 45 minutes west of Charlotte, North Carolina. And movies took a little while to get to my neck of the woods. Although, to be fair, in the 1970s, movie release patterns were different. They weren't splashed on a bunch of screens all at once. Sometimes they were released in dribs and drabs, as they say. Star Wars kind of sort of was. We'll get into that. But anyway, I just wanted to share a few memories of my personal experience going to see Star Wars in August of 1977. It was a typically hot day in August of 1977. The new school year had not yet begun, but was just around the corner. And perhaps Elvis Presley was even dead and buried by this time, although I can't be sure. I really can't remember that detail. But let's just go with it. The point is that none of this mattered. And all was right with the world and in the world, because now the event that my neighborhood pals, my sister and I have waited all summer for was finally here. 3 months of anticipation due to news coverage on television and word of mouth, no internet buzz, of course. It had finally, Star Wars, had finally made it to our small town theater, the Century Theater in Lincolnton, North Carolina. My father somehow became the designated adult in our neighborhood, and he was saddled with the task of taking all of the overly excited neighborhood kids to see the film that everyone was talking about. And so it was that we piled into our family car, which was a 1972 Chrysler Newport, and we headed downtown to bear witness to this film. Packed into that car that day were myself, my sister Erin, my youngest sister Carrie would not arrive for another 2 summers, the 2 neighborhood boys from up the street, Skip and Chad Salinas, and my father. And there may have even been possibly a few more of the neighborhood kids with us, but that I can't say for sure. Some things in my memory are lost to the sands of time, and my father is no longer with us to corroborate the story, so we'll just have to go with it. I can't say for sure. To repeat. Suffice it to say, there was such a carload full of kids, longing for the longing for thrills that only the movies can provide, that when we all unloaded from the car and we walked up to the ticket booth, the attendant felt sorry for my father. Now, what you need to realize is the actual owner and the manager of the theater actually lived across the street from us, so he kind of sort of knew us. And he knew the kids in the neighborhood, and he knew I was kind of movie crazy. Why my father never took me over there and introduced me to him personally and asked him if I could get a tour of the projection booth, I don't know why my dad never thought of that, but that's another story for another time. Nevertheless, the guy in the ticket booth that day, I can't say for sure who it was, although I do have some idea, he felt sorry for my father, and he charged my dad only $1 a head for each of us kids, because there were just so many of us. Times sure have changed, I guess, with ticket prices these days. Anyway, the experience of seeing Star Wars that first time provided each of us with our own individual memories that have traveled with us on our various paths of life. I don't think any of us have forgotten it. It wasn't just the film itself, but also the time and the place as much as anything else. We were much more innocent then, and we relied on our imaginations to get us through those times that could be challenging. Especially when you lived in a small town and it was hard to connect with other cinemaniacs as yourself in a town when that just wasn't a priority. Boredom would sometimes threaten to overtake us, but those imaginations that we had would get us through, and Star Wars was part of that imagination. When the Star Wars merchandising craze began later on, Skip, Chad, and myself would fire ourselves up creatively, and we would create our own adventures using the action figures molded from the film's characters. Of course, the toys were not ready in time. There was such so much of a demand for these Star Wars toys in Christmas of 1977, they couldn't make them fast enough. So my neighbors didn't get them until 1978. But when they did, we had a lot of adventures that we created from our minds. If Star Wars did nothing else for us, it certainly turned us on to the power of creativity by encouraging us to use our minds just as George Lucas had. And it filled us with a desire to create our own worlds and universes, albeit on a smaller scale. Those were different times. We didn't have phones to play with, and sometimes we were all the better for it. It's hard to imagine a time when it would take a film with the pop cultural significance of Star Wars 3 months to get to a theater where one could actually experience it. Yet, that is exactly how it was back in those days. Nowadays, a film is splashed across thousands of screens, as I just mentioned, and if it doesn't do big box office, it's gone in a matter of weeks. Back in those days, more innocent days, I might add, major releases were rolled out gradually, usually only in a handful of theaters at first. The studios would rely on word of mouth to build the anticipation for the product, and the film would gradually make its way around the country until everyone had an ample opportunity to see it, and then it would get a re-release a couple of years down the road for those who missed it the first time. After that, the next step was network television, where, with VCRs not commonplace, entire families would alter their plans in order to take in films they may have missed theatrically. Star Wars, along with Jaws, changed all of that, and it wasn't long before films being rolled out on large numbers of screens became the norm. Star Wars was released on May 25th, 1977, a Wednesday, and it was released only on 32 screens. And most of you watching this video, I'm sure, know that already. But the question begs to be asked, why was Star Wars released initially to so few theaters when, in retrospect, the movie seemed like a surefire hit? Well, the website From Script to DVD quotes Ben Burtt, the Star Wars sound effects guy, as saying no one knew it was going to be a big hit. Nowadays, we take for granted that a big blockbuster will go out with thousands of prints and open in May. But back then, the summer special effects blockbuster did not exist. Also telling is that Fox executive Gareth Wigan had to say what he had to say about it in the 1997 book, Empire Building. And he says, Star Wars only opened in 40 theaters because we could only get 40 theaters to book it. That's the astonishing thing. Unquote. By comparison, here are a list of other films released in 1977 and the number of their initial screens. The Spy Who Loved Me was in 200 plus screens. Smokey and the Bandit, 300 plus. A Bridge Too Far, 400 plus. New York, 400 plus as well. Roller Coaster, 400 plus. The Other Side of Midnight, which was another 20th Century Fox release, 500 plus screens. Exorcist II, The Heretic, 700 plus screens. Orca the Killer Whale, 700 plus screens. And The Deep, 800 plus screens. That's an interesting set of statistics, I think, in lieu of what Star Wars would become. So, on the anniversary of Star Wars release, yet again, on the 47th anniversary, just thought I would make a quick video with a few personal thoughts and a few factoids and figures about it. Thanks for watching, and if you've enjoyed it, like, subscribe, or comment. I love chatting with any of you who decide to comment. I always enjoy hearing from people. It's always good to hear what other people's experiences may or may not have been. Thanks again. Till next time.